Hey, if you're listening to this episode and benefiting from it, could you help me reach more like-minded listeners by rating it 5 stars? It only takes 2 seconds. Just pause this episode and click on the stars. Thank you. Welcome to the Life Affairs podcast. This is a place where we share life experiences and the many lessons learned by just living. Join me to immerse ourselves and take a closer look at the stories that shaped and defined us. Just remember, there's no judgment and a lot of understanding on today's episode of the Life Affairs podcast. Hello, my dear listeners. My guest is here and we started talking about politics. The recording happened to be in the day that the election of the USA are known. We also talked about my cat who keep hovering around me and a few other things before we got into the topic. And the topic is about kink, a little bit of BDSM, about consent, what make us like the things we like, and most importantly, what does it mean, kink, and why every one of us has it, but we just don't call it kink. We call it something else. Here we are. I want you to join me. You will notice I'm very talkative in this episode because I'm passionate about it. And also because it's raw. Topic is not easy. And I was nervous because I want to put myself out there, what I think, what I believe, and how I feel. And also be held back by my own belief and culture and who might be listening to me and judging me. Without further ado, I'll leave you to it. How did you wake up today? I personally woke up and I feel so depressed because of the news in the US.
Oh, I knew that was coming. Unfortunately, I knew that was coming. People, it's really not that complicated. People vote on their pocketbook, and people had this sense that, prices were going up under one administration, so let's try another one. I think at the end of the day, it's just about, money. People, do I feel rich or poor? People don't want to admit it. They'll talk about all these other issues and all the rest of it. But I think for a lot of people, it's just like, well, wait a minute, my money doesn't go as far as it did before. So let's try something different,
Yeah. So,
The inflation was incredible. I mean, this last couple of years, how the prices of things went up and people's pay didn't go up that fast. So I think a lot of people were just like, well, wait a minute. I'm working hard, making all this money, but everything's costing that much more. Let's try something else. And everything ties to that. It's like, how do I, oh, maybe people are taking my jobs. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe, it's all just, in the end of the day, people may, you know, tout all sorts of values and things like that, but people tend to vote based on their pocketbook in the end.
My cat, I don't know what he's doing. Just a second, because I see him.
I see.
Jumping.
I see his tail.
Yeah.
Just a tail.
He's gonna make his crazy round and I think we'll leave soon.
It's okay.
Crazy.
I like cats. I like looking at cats.
Yeah, and this one is a Bengal, so it's a pleasure looking at him. He's really pretty.
Wow.
But
Wow, was it actually like a little Bengal tiger or
yeah, yes, like
wow.
a little. Oh my goodness, I forgot the word in English. Not with the stripe, but with the circles.
Oh yeah, right. Lion and tiger.
Like
I can't remember which is which. Leopard. There you go.
Leopard. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But he is very sweet. His character is very sweet.
But in this lifetime, we come back as some pet with a good owner. That's kind of a good life, eh? Just still do what you want, eat what you want, hang out. As long as you have a good owner. Obviously, not all pets get a great owner.
But I have read that cats, they take the character of their owners. And
it makes sense. We mimic behavior. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, any animal mimics the behavior, for better or for worse, of the people or the other creatures around.
Yes. My first question to you today is, what do you think make a person kinky?
It's very, very complicated. For someone to be kinky, you have to be alive. Everyone has a kink. Everyone has this. I mean, if you were born and you have a life, you have kinks. The real question that I find interesting is how many people don't think they're kinky, because there's this thing that humans do where whatever I do is normal. Even if I do play some weird sport or have a particular interest, that's normal. I grew up in a culture where, when I was a kid, Playboy was still a big thing. So big boobs and a certain look was normal. Therefore, I was normal. But then traveling the world and realized, well, no, I was taught to fetishize a certain form. So I had a kink, I had a fetish, but I didn't know it. Everyone has that. We grow up with a culture, we grow up with influences around us, and we start to like things. And some of those things we think is normal, and it may be normal in our little group and might be incredibly weird for another group or incredibly kinky for another group to use that. So, what it takes to have a kink, a life. If you're alive, you have a kink. Now, you understanding that it is a kink, or appreciating that, or respecting other people's kinks, well, that's more of a process. But I guarantee, in the end, a kink is much simpler than people think. It's something that really excites you. Maybe you like a good conversation. Maybe you like a nice smile. Maybe you like beautiful eyes. Maybe you do like someone's hands, or, classic ones men always talk about, and they don't even think it's a kink, is, oh, I really, are you more a boob man or an ass man? Somehow that's normal. Well, guess what? That's kink. If you're retracted someone purely based on a particular attribute, that's a fetish and that's a kink. You know, don't think of it any other way. Like, oh, well, no, but that's normal. The feet, well, that's weird. Okay, so that body part and that body part is fine, but that body part is weird. No, that's silly. It's just a societal judgment. Bottom line, everybody's kinky, whether they realize it or not. Really, kinky should be becoming more self-aware, just to realize it really, I mean, maybe that's what, there is this interesting thing I've noticed from talking to so many kinky people over the years. They really are, and I don't want to sound arrogant, or, well, I'm complimenting a community, I guess, but they are smarter. They're more self-aware. They're more generally a little bit more educated if they know what it is and understand that, because it takes that sort of ability to sort of contrast and compare before you start to make those self discoveries that, oh, goodness, I guess that is a bit of a kink.
I love your explanation because it makes it so real and so close to home for everyone. We don't think of it as kink. We just give it as our what attracts us to someone.
Absolutely.
It could be that the word kink could be replaced with attraction, and then it can
Absolutely.
be more accepted.
Absolutely. Or fed. I mean, fed. You know, one of the things that I found confusing when I entered into the conversation about kink is that kink is actually a really big house. The house that, in this house that is kink lives largely two relatively separate communities within that. One is the BDSM community, which is into bondage, they're into discipline, they're into play with power. Sometimes they're interested in play with pain. And in my personal experience, a small percentage of that is actually anything to do with sex at all. It's non-sexual. I would say, in my in my personal opinion, maybe 20% of people that are into BDSM, mix sex into that. Sex may be something, so they may do BDSM, they may do sex later, but it's not necessarily part of BDSM. And now the other big house in the house that's called kink is fetishism. Fetishism is more what we're talking about right now. We're calling that kinks, but in kink terms, it would probably be more accurately called fetishes, things that really super turn you on, super attract you. But yeah, in that case, the word attractions or interests, I think, works as well. I mean, it depends how strict you want to define fetish. If it's an absolute, obsession, I don't think that's what most people are talking about. Like, oh, I can only get up in the morning if I see, an armpit because that's my thing. extreme obsession. I don't think that's what we're talking about. That's obsession and that's unhealthy. What we're talking about is much simpler. It's just that's what turns me on. I really like a man with big hands or a woman with great eyes. That's one of the things that really gets me going. So it's important to understand, a little bit about the structure of the house that is kink. And then now we're not talking so much about BDSM because this is where I start a lot of confusion. Because then they go, well, what about this? What about that? Well, that's not really a fetish. It's actually more of a role. It's more looking for certain sensations. That's what BDSM is about. Where fetishism is more about attraction. I like this, I like that. So I think it's important to make that distinction early on because I know when I started this process, I kept getting confused
Mm.
between, okay, what are we talking about now? Because some people will talk about it in the fetish context and the what attracts us context, and other people will talk about it in the identity thing, where I identify as a dominant, I identify as a submissive, I play this role, I play that role. That is a little different than simply in something that attracts you. Although obviously the stuff gets mixed around, but it's important to, I think, clarify that early in the conversation so people hopefully won't get as messed up as I did because it took me a while to figure out that normally when you talk to somebody, they're obviously talking from their perspective. And if they're coming from a BDSM perspective, they're going to talk one way. If they're talking from a fetishist perspective, they're going to talk another way. And they don't necessarily speak the same language, even though they all live in the house that is kink.
Hey, if you're listening to this episode and benefiting from it, could you help me reach more like-minded listeners by rating it 5 stars? It only takes 2 seconds. Just pause this episode and click on the stars. Thank you. What brought you into this? How did you start getting knowledge of the kink world with fetish and BDSM to lead you to do your movie, Touch Kink?
I'll try and give you a relatively short answer. I think
Yes,
I was
please.
just always a weird kid. I was always just somebody that didn't fit in. And I didn't understand what that was, but I didn't really fit in with what I was told how I was supposed to be. In fact, I was mildly suicidal as a teenager. I didn't actually start enjoying my life until I left and came to Europe and then traveled for many years and started finding out that, tel surprise, not every country has the same values. Not every country thinks the same way. Not every culture does things the same way. And that there was this big, beautiful spectrum of possibility. And I felt more comfortable with that. And I realized that I was more of a dominant person in the sense that I just couldn't really follow the rules. I wanted to make my own rules for better, for worse. I would go my own way. And I didn't really understand what that was until I read a book about kink and BDSM, talking about one of the common things, especially on the BDSM side of the house of kink, is this idea of being dominant or submissive. Dominant people tend to go where they want to go and do what they want to do. And, hell be damned, and they can't really be any other way. And then I realized, oh, gee, I've been always like that. I've always preferred more, a little wilder sexual interactions and things like this. And I always knew I was pushing the boundaries, especially with what was going on in the culture at the time. But so I was always very aware of consent, like, okay, like I would like to do this. I get that this might be something that, you know, might not be politically correct. Should we have a conversation about this? Is this something you want to do and explore? Yes, it is. Great. Well, let's now enter into this. It was a way of me navigating who I was and what I wanted without necessarily being bound by what, the society tells us. So that was just a process that evolutionarily speaking, I just had always been that way. And then I started being able to understand why I was that way and that there was a language to talk about it.
I think we are in times today where we talk less about sex. We talk a lot about consent, which make us scared from enjoying our sexual life. And you discovered this years ago, where consent came naturally because you were self-aware of what you want and needed to make sure the other person is on board.
Well, I'd like to say I was particularly self-aware, but honestly, I think I was more just didn't want to get in trouble. I
Mm.
recognized that, uh, some of these things, you don't want someone to come back and go, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe that person tied me up, and it wasn't, my goodness, like, or this or that." And like, I think I would like to say I was self-aware, but the truth is, I was just wanted to be safe, wanted to, I like to joke, I'm too pretty to go to jail. I just wanted to make sure that this was cool with this person that I was interacting with out of self-preservation, to be honest. And later I realized that it was important to actually be, as I became more mature, I started realizing that it was also the right thing to do. But in the beginning, I'm not going to lie. I mean, it was really just like, let's just, there wasn't the conversations there is now about consent and ethical and, informed ethical consent and all these things. Those conversations didn't exist as much. I just really wanted to be clear so I didn't get into trouble of any kind.
Very good. It's a good protection for both of you and whomever you're playing with.
Mhm.
So can we say that the House of King developed with time into something safer? Or because, people, when they think of BDSM, probably mostly, they think of disrespect, that people are forced to do things. It's like all the play and the enjoyment is taken out from it, from the people on the sideline, and think that this is wrong and only weirdo are doing it.
Yeah.
So how do you
Well,
look
the
at
the
that?
label the label weirdo has been used to malign groups of people since millennia. So I mean, it's just one of those words when you don't understand something, you go, "Okay, those are weird people. I can't have a conversation with those people." To speak to your first point about this notion of is it safer now? Yes and no. In many ways, it is safer because people are having those conversations that they might not have had, and they're more aware of it. And with knowledge of something, it becomes more likely you'll do it safely. Obviously, think of skiing down a mountain. The more you know about skiing, the safer it is to ski down that mountain. If you don't know anything about it and you strap on a pair of skis and go off a black diamond run, it's probably not going to go very well. So knowledge will always help you. The other why I say no is a lot of the old guard will say to you, and perhaps quite accurately, that it's not as safe as it was because in the old days it was much harder to get into. It was much more structured and there was more sort of protocols to it. You had to really want it. And there was a process where you had to first serve and then you had to be of service to the community. Then you had to earn your leather, they would say, where you had to really, so there was a it was much harder to get into, but you really had to go through a lot before you were able to before you were allowed to pick up a whip and actually, or pick up something and actually hit someone. So, you know, and that still exists, but a lot of the old guard will often say, that it's a little too easy for people to get into. You go to a kink party these days and somebody who's, 20 years old, walks, well, I'm a dom and this and that, and you should just get, serve me and blah blah blah. And he probably just read a book or saw a movie or something and thought, oh, this is fun and I'm going to use it. It's a little not really understanding the scope of it. And also with the submissives, maybe it's just, hey, I'm just a little lonely, I'm wanting to meet people, I hear this BDSM thing's picking up, I'm going to go in, I guess, identify as a submissive. Oh, that means I have to do whatever you tell me. Oh, okay. No, it doesn't. No, you don't. As a submissive, you don't have to do everything a dominant tells you. You have to negotiate still. And no, as a dominant, you don't have this some universal key from the universe that lets you do anything you want to anybody who's submissive. But there are a lot of people who walk into the community for the first time because it's so much more open than it used to be, who have a little bit of that sense, a little bit of knowledge can be actually dangerous. It's like, yeah, I know how to strap on a pair, using the ski analogy. Well, sure, I know about skiing. I know how to strap on a pair of skis. I'm so much farther ahead than everyone else. I see, strapped on those skis down the road. Oh, you have to have a certain amount. So Yes and no. But it's like anything else. We have to go the way we people have to learn about it. Unfortunately, you people have to fall down. I just hope that the knowledge gets out quick enough that, and I think it is, gets out quick enough that people will learn quick enough that there won't be too many people that will fall into any of these traps of doing things that they shouldn't do because they think of themselves as submissive, or doing things that they shouldn't do because they think that they're themselves as dominant without actually understanding the full implications of the process.
Goal from opening up this conversation, and maybe on my podcast and in the movie you made, people become more aware of the possibilities and where to place themselves. Because, when we don't talk about these things, it will go wrong, or the wrong book could be recommended, or a good book will be wrongly understood. As long as we talk, this is my goal also from the podcast, is to bring up a topic and talk about it so that everyone feel empowered to like it or hate it. That's not a problem, but to do the right thing by themselves. And what you're saying, when a person want to go into the BDSM scene, it's good to educate themselves, or maybe find a mentor or get the right questions, and not just go for it thinking, oh, this is going to be okay. They are experienced and used to it.
Absolutely. You know, society will often say to us, just do this, don't do that. And they're kind of like our parents. They're trying to protect us. Don't climb that ladder. You might fall, but they don't want to tell you the nuances of why you might fall off it. It takes a lot of conversations to sort of, and a lot of knowledge to sort of see things as nuanced, and then to fully understand when it is appropriate to do something or not. Uh, it's necessary in society to have a lot of these conversations and really get to know it. The thing that I tried to do with my film Touch Kink, and I want to try and instill on people, if you remember one thing, please remember this. If it's a circle, if there's a lot of conversation, open and honest conversation, and by the way, this is everything. This isn't just kink. This is business. This is personal life. This is non-kink too. Really try and, if you're going to interact with someone in an intimate way, in any or in a serious way, have lots of conversation with them, have really open conversations with them, try and give as much information. When you arrive on some decision, try to make sure they fully understand the implications of what you're doing, and you fully understand the implications of what you're doing, that it's informed, it's ethical, and that you decide to do whatever you decide to do. When you do that thing, enjoy the thing, have some way, just in case the thing isn't going the way you want, that you can we take a minute here, stop, safe word, whatever you want to call it. Can we put this on pause for a second because maybe something isn't going out the way that you expected it to do? And okay, if everything goes fine, and then afterwards go, so how was that for you? Was that okay? Did you get what you expected out of that? Yes or no? And then finishing the circle with, let's talk about it again. Everything we do, if we do it as a circle, that's compassionate, that's caring, and that's ethical. And it's just that simple. Talking openly without shame, arriving on that decision, coming to some sort of consent, doing that thing with some sort of safety valve, checking in with that person, and talking again. That circle. And that's what my film is all about, is the circle. Because conversely, and you realize it's not about the activity. If I walk over to you and just slap you across the face, I'm just doing what I want and I don't care. That's abuse. If we have a conversation, turns out you really like to be slapped on the face, and we say how hard and why is this and why do you like it, and open hand or this or that, and oh, you like this and that. Okay, great. Well, sure, I can give that a go. And so, but just in case, if it I hit you too hard or something, whatever, how are you going to let me know, or if you want me to stop that? And by the way, once we're done this, what does the aftercare look like? Do you want me to just walk away and be kind of pretend I'm cruel? You want a hug? You want me to make you a cup of tea? Great, we've talked about all this stuff. Okay, great. And now I do the same thing I did with that, and now that's perfectly fine. And we have a mutually enjoyable experience. It wasn't about being slapped across the face. It was about the process behind it, the ethics behind it. And that's the most important thing I try and get across in the film. And I try and get across, if you have to learn one thing about kink, just do that. Open, honest conversations without shame. Hopefully, those people can share as best as they can about their interests, and you can find something you might want to do together. And if you do find something you want to do together, figure out what that thing is, make sure both people understand the full implications, because some of this stuff is more difficult than others. Some of this stuff is more dangerous than other stuff. But so make sure you're both, fully aware of what you're doing, and you have some sort of safety valve just in case it doesn't quite go the way you expected it to go. And also before you start, know what it's going to look, how are we going to finish this up, how we're going to end this, so we know what your aftercare looks like. You do all that stuff or do that and understand that process. I think the rest of the stuff will just sort itself out. If you understand the circle, if you understand how to be a compassionate human being, put aside kink, put aside anything else, just doing that, you know, I think that puts you in pretty good stead, and that's the one thing that I try and push the most, and the one thing that I think the best place to start. You learn all the fancy titles and all the names of this and that as you go along, but if someone brings up something like, "Oh, well, I'm really into figging, and would you like to be fig? Are you into figging?" And you go, "Well, I don't know what that is." "Oh, well, let me explain it to you." As opposed to you don't have to know what all the stuff is. Someone brings up an activity that they want to do with you, and you don't say, "Well, could you explain that to me? What is that?" Because believe me, if they're bringing it up, they really want to explain it to you because it's their thing. So, just, just, if be ready to have those conversations. And if someone brings up something you don't understand, don't feel shy, but, well, what is that? Can you explain? How do you do that? And, tell me more about what that is, as opposed to learning I mean, there's tens of thousands of kinks in the world. You know, it's just have those conversations. So just learn to have conversation, learn to get informed consent, and learn to play safe.
These conversations, I'm going to bring us back to the audience, because I don't know how kinky my audience is. And I don't
Everybody's
know.
kinky. I told you that
Yeah,
already.
exactly. I do believe
Everybody's kinky. They're,
everybody's
they're they're
kinky.
far more kinky than they realize, but
But the
that's okay.
conversations are not there, and where am I going? Give me a moment, because I'm going to explain it. So what happens is that in conventional relationships, or, once you're in a conventional relationship, you feel like, yeah, this is what you have to do for the rest of your life. And with time, the conversations are gone about intimacy. People just stop having fun, maybe fantasizing, but not having the conversation. Because in the relationships, the normal, I don't want to say normal ones, because all relationships can be normal. In the, let's say, conservative, conventional relationship, the couples stop talking about that. There is a lot of ego going on in there, and a lot of dissatisfaction. And they prefer not to have sex rather than tell each other what they like, even if what they like is maybe a slap on the ass or choking or a bit more rough sex. So these conversations, when they listen to what you're saying, like, I hope it encourages them to, it's okay to talk about that. But what I want to touch exactly on here and ask you about it, from what you're describing, is where would the ego go? And where would the self-confidence go when people are asking for what they want and the other persons are like, "Oh, so what I'm giving you is not enough," or "It's not what you like, so go and look for someone else." These conversations happen a lot. How does it,
Yeah.
how does this training could go?
Yeah. Well, yeah. This is a cultural thing too. I don't know who said it, but I've heard it said that, at least in past culture, men weren't really ever allowed a full spectrum of emotions. We're allowed to be sort of slightly proud of ourselves and slightly angry. Everything else isn't manly. So it's, obviously ill prepared to sort of deal with a lot of the things that come up in life, just kind of paralyzed when you're feeling sad, or you're paralyzed when you're feeling melancholy, or these kinds of things. So I guess first, there has been a lot of talk and a lot of movies and TV about mental health generally, to have the ability to express who you are, and deal with some of these insecurities and deal with these things, because we all have them. I think a lot of the things that, you know, express themselves as, oh my God, how could you, was really just an inability to process. Like, oh my God, you want to do that? Oh, I can't process what you're saying to me, so just don't do it. You're weird. It goes down to mental health. It goes down to having the ability. And I honestly do think we need to give men a bit of a break because honestly, there's been a lot of cultural shift and cultural change. I think maybe that's why certain political things are moving the way they are because it's all going a little too fast for some guys and they don't know how to handle it. So they're kind of doing this knee-jerk reaction of voting for whoever they think will stop it because they need a break. They can't handle it. So just, be a little patient with these people to try and find it. And I think Kink does that too, because one of the core things in Kink that I love is role play. A lot of people will fetishize playing a certain role, or maybe someone's going to be, okay, I'll be the bottom, I'll be the submissive, you're the dominant, and that like helps me balance things out. Um, or all sorts of other things. It's almost like as children, we learn about the world through play. As kink, in a lot of cases, is really just adults learning to play again. How do I freshen up my relationship? Maybe they're not ready to go to figging, but maybe we can do, how about I have a thing for feet I've never really mentioned before. Would you mind terribly if I like kissed and massaged your feet? Person may or may not be that into it, but they'll probably be like, especially if they're your partners, like, actually, my feet could really use that. Great, okay. Giving them the space to try something. So, yeah, I mean, give people the space to find these things, give people the space to adapt. And that, again, only starts through mental health and it only starts through having trust. It's hard, especially get into a relationship. If it was established in more traditional ways, and both people are to blame, by the way, maybe, he looking for XYZ, they got XYZ, it came together. The relationship is based on these three values that they thought were important in the beginning. And it's hard for them to go, actually, that's really not as important as I thought it was. You have to sort of right from the beginning think less about specific things and more about spectrums. Right now, I'm a little bit more like this and a little bit more like that, but I'm a fluid human being and I might change. Is that cool? I think of myself as a manly man. Maybe now I want to might be a bit switchier someday. I think of myself as this. And what about you? If you have early conversations, which are very typical with kinky people, about we're fluid, we're going to probably change, and I hope that's okay with you, then I think that would put you in better stead as well, as opposed to I'm always going to be about X and I'm always going to be about Y and I'm always going to be about Z. I mean, nothing ever stays the same.
We change with the years, with the seasons, with our ages. And sometimes, in many cases, we are afraid to admit that what we used to like is now different and we see things differently because there is some kind of, I know you and I trust you the way you are. So if you change, then it's like you're in this new person. And it doesn't have to be. It's nice to change. I personally encourage people to embrace their change and explore because we don't know what we like until we try.
We change on so many levels. We change on what's the conversation going on in our society. We also change on a simple biological level. I don't know if it's been proven out, but I've always heard, and it's certainly been my experience that, a man's sex drive probably peaks at about 18 and slowly goes down from there. I'm finding, I found most of my 20s and 30s just thinking about sex all the time. I mean, that was it. I mean, I'm having a cup of coffee and I'm thinking about having sex with the barista. I'm walking down in the street and thinking, like all the time. And now I'm getting to an old where I actually find myself not always thinking about sex. I'm like, oh, wow, okay. Where I live in Montreal, or lived in Montreal, and Montreal is a place where women are very interested in what they're interested in and not very unapologetic. And, finding myself turning down situations that I would never turn down before. So we're just into, our biology changes as well. Yeah, I like to joke that can't we have a conversation first now? Is like, won't you buy me a drink first or something? Can we get to know each other a little bit now? Which,
Hmm.
Wouldn't have mattered before. It's, I feel that the emotional connection is more important now than it used to be. And maybe that's age, maybe that's intellect, I don't know. But
It's also
for
life
women,
experience,
yeah. But I
to
do find
have.
that, mhm. Go ahead.
Sorry, continue.
No, I would just say, generally speaking, and maybe it's Montreal, but I find that, and I think it's a good thing, women are more open about what they want and very specific about it, than they used to be, you know?
I notice this with the conversations because, when we women sit together, we have more open conversations and vulnerable conversations than probably men sitting together. And I don't know, for my listeners, I know we should be including all genders, but my experience is in majority men and women. And because women are open about the conversations, we inspire each other in what we like and where we
Hmm.
stand. And I can speak for myself since I'm 50, and the worry of having children and caring for children is much less. I'm feeling that now is the time for me to live again, because for women, it takes so much time thinking about bearing children and being able to have little babies and take care of them. So we miss so many years from our life just worried about that and being exhausted. And after 50, this brings me to something is that I had this conversation with my husband that women after 50, they look for younger guys because they're probably at that age. I say probably, but now I can confirm it. At after 50, we want to explore, we want to live because the worries and the family is settled. And well, my husband was telling me, men look for younger women when they're older, not because of the sex, but because of the status. And this sounded, for me, it sounded true because if women after 50 are more sexually active, then yeah, they will be looking for younger people. And this is like changing in the seasons and just accepting who we are. I'm not sure who's listening to me, but I don't hope my kids are listening or my family, because that would be a very eye opener for them. At the end, I hope that everyone feel empowered to like what they like and keep the respect and the consent and continue living their life. I want to go back to your movie a little bit because in Touch Kink, I've seen people from different backgrounds, all walks of life, and it was touching. Sometimes I felt so emotional listening to them because they found the place that make them safe and happy, heard, understood. And outside this place, which is the King and the BDSM, they were regular people, respectful. They have their jobs, their families. They're not bad people whatsoever. Can you bring me a little bit with you with these people that you have interviewed in your documentary and what impact they are leaving on the scene from your movie?
Um, well, I think first off, I think it's important, and I think a little bit of the theme that's developing through this podcast is that everybody's kinky, everybody is into this, whether they realize it or not. And I think speaking to that, there's this duality in everyone. It's okay to be a polite, respectful person. In fact, it's well advised. If I'm coming into your house and the protocol is to take off my shoes when I enter, I take off the shoes. If the protocol is to leave the shoes on, I leave the shoes on. If the protocol is to bring you a bottle of wine or an orange or, to kiss you 3 times, to kiss you 2 times, to give you a hug, whatever the protocols are based on your culture, I'm going to follow those because I'm a respectful human being and I'm going to honor the culture, and that's fine. That's one side. Now, if I get to know you, like you're saying with your girlfriends and stuff, you have conversations a lot more intimate. Once we get to know, we can have conversations about, you know, particular kinks and particular interests and see if we connect on those levels. And it's okay to be two people. I mean, it's okay just because you might be a wild, crazy. In fact, most of the people that are the best at this, you would never know because they are so respectful and are so like this, and then the other side of them is so intense and so fun. It's like literally two different people. And I think that's healthy. I really do think it's healthy. There's a public you and there's a private you. The public you has to get along at work and be polite and get a certain amount of respect in your community. And the private you can be whatever you want to be. I respect people that want to sort of show who they are all the time, but sometimes I wonder if they might be scaring too many people sometimes, if they push it a little too hard, too fast. That's, other people's decision. But I think duality is just a natural thing. I was speaking to a friend of mine this morning about who's a dominatrix and saying, well, at least this will be good for business because the more conservative the world is culturally, the more people that will go outside of their families and outside of their relationships to professional sex workers because they still want this. In fact, sales are going to go up now because they're going to have to be more closeted about this. So, I'm sure that nobody really wanted that, but at the same time, from a business point of view, business is going to be good for dominatrixes for the next 4 years.
There's a blooming business. Well, if I want to mention is that we're not talking about people cheating and doing things outside their marriages or their partnerships, etc. We're talking about people who are agreeing and living their life the best way they think it's good for them and for the others. Because, sometimes when there are topics, people think that you're fostering behavior and some other get offended. And this is not what we mean in here. It's good
Yeah,
to
no,
have
that's a good.
conversations.
That's an important distinction. It's like, I mean, there are two things here. I was joking about the professional side of this, but the much larger community is just the general kinky community that just generally wants to do this stuff and have those conversations. And for them, it is always going to be joyful. But again, it is always a matter of cultivating the two sides of your personality.
Yes. So can we say that in these days where people are seeking more excitement and there is a lot of social media stuff and the eyes are more open about what is outside in the world, what are the things they have to pay attention to before they jump into an adventure of play?
Being safe, again, it's that circle. Remember the circle, remember the circle. And there's four parts to the circle. Negotiation, where you're having open and honest conversations and you're really talking about whatever and asking lots of questions and finding out about that other person, getting that consent, making sure they understand what they're consenting to, having some safety valve, a safe word sort of situation in play, and then checking in with the person afterwards. Remember that. And it doesn't really matter what you do. If someone comes to you say, well, my whole thing is I'd love to find someone to, I don't know, do fire play. And that, like, oh, sure, let's do it. That's a really crazy thing to say yes to right away because it's a very complicated thing. If someone knows what they're doing, it can be quite an experience. I've never tried it myself. I've seen it. But if someone approached me and I was remotely interested, I would ask a lot of questions before I would agree to it. Find out if the person knows what they're doing. Find out exactly what kind of sensation could I expect to get from this. A lot of people, it's not sexual. So sometimes it's a feeling, a pain. It can be humiliating. It can be some people love to be tied up with rope. And apparently I've heard it described as a hug. It feels like a really nice hug. I'm like, that doesn't really seem what it looks like to me, but I guess someone intimately tying you and bringing their hand around and wrapping rope around you, I guess I could see that. So just, ask lots of questions. Don't be shy. And hopefully if that person won't answer your questions, move on. And hopefully that person will give you information. So just, ask lots of questions. That's more important than anything else.
Mm. I like the part in where this is all play and it doesn't have to end up in sex or whatever. It could be just play to get the sensation that every person or that person who desires it asking for it. And I hope that people listening will take a moment to think of the sensations that they like to have because I don't think we take the moment to think about that, or things pass
No,
by quickly and we don't give them any attention.
you're absolutely right. In fact, I've often talk about this overarching theory I have about kink because having met so many different people from dominatrixes to spankos to leather people to latex people to a million different communities that all live in the house that is kink, they all use different language to explain this, and they all have sort of different starting points. Like if you're in a femdom situation, you're probably going to start with the premise that all men want to serve, and women. I'm not going to argue the point or whatever, but it's just there's a certain premise in the house, and if you're part of the spanko community, that well, a lot of the spankos, people that like to spank each other, often say it's not even a kink at all. That's just normal. That's the way the universe is meant to be. We're not kinky at all. We just like to do give and take spanking. So, but in the end, I believe it boils down to three things you should always have in mind, and I call it like red, green, blue, RGB, like how TVs project color. Red, your focus, what you're thinking about. I'm thinking about the rope. I'm thinking about you. I'm thinking about a particular sensation, something that's really turning me on in my mind, the focus. The green is the role or the identity I have in that moment. I'm feeling submissive. I'm feeling dominant. I'm feeling worthless. I'm feeling masculine. I'm feeling feminine. I'm feeling a million different things you could be feeling, but who you feel like in the moment. And blue, and that's what maybe is the sensation you're seeking. Everyone thinks it's about sex. It may or may not be the sensation you're seeking, maybe an orgasm, but it may not be. It may be intimacy. It may be humiliation. It may be pain. It may be pride. It may be a whole bunch of other feelings you're looking for, but it's not always about orgasm, it's not about sex, but you are seeking a sensation. And for many people, it's intimacy. It's just connecting on another level, that really deep connection, that night where you've had this long, amazing conversation with someone, you feel like really connected to that person. Maybe you didn't have sex with them, but you have this real, like, my God, we've just had brain sex or something, or I feel an intimate connection to this person. That's a powerful feeling. And some people, that's what they want. So just breaking it down again, it's like in any given scene, we're thinking about what we're thinking about, you know, we're feeling the role. Okay, I'm right now. I'm thinking about the podcast. I'm trying to like be focused on this. This has got my focus attention. I'm feeling I'm supposed okay on my role. I guess I'm supposed to be a bit of an expert right now. Okay, I'll try and be a bit of an expert right now. I mean, I have opinions. I think a lot of people know a lot more than me, but for the sake of this, my role is an expert. And I'm hoping at the end of this, I feel like, oh, I did a good job. Oh, I think I did a good job. That's it. Everything is like that in life. We're focused on what we're focused on. We feel how we feel, and we want whatever result we want from it. And kink, sex, business, doing a podcast is all the same thing. In a BDSM context, maybe I'm interested in the smell of rope, and I'm going to be the dominant, and I want to feel powerful at the end of this. Whatever. It's those three things, and that's everything in life as well. People act like some of this stuff is this weird other stuff. Everything was weird other stuff till it wasn't, and some stuff that has been normal now would be the weird other stuff. I mean, certainly Victorian swimwear is actually Victorian swimwear clothing is a kinky thing. People, one rising kink is what they call 50s household. It's basically trying to sort of act like it's 1952 again. It's like that. What was normal is now a kink. It's all kinky. They're all, part of the human thought, part of how people think.
You bring me thinking to something. Whenever I'm on social media or I don't know, all over around me, there is this big emphasis that and it's true to a certain extent, we need to go out and do endurance sports and feel happy and have the ice bath and do all these things in nature, which is beautiful. And there is a lot of talk about how this will help our mental health, will help us be happy. But there is little talk about some people don't want to do that. Some people want to have an intimate conversation because that will fulfill their soul, their mental health. And these are things saying, no, you can't have, come on, you can't have kinky conversation with someone. This is ridiculous. It's embarrassing. Go and sport with someone. It's nice to have it normal with people we trust, start building it up a little bit. I know that since the moment I have intimate conversations about our longings, my husband and I, we're much happier. And I'm saying intimately we're happier. We feel more connected rather than not talk about it and talk only about sport and how it makes us feel. So yes, the message I want to give here is that sometimes we like something that other thing is weird. It doesn't make it wrong. We just
And
have
sometimes
to
you're
search for people who likes it too, so we can feel fulfilled.
Absolutely. And although I believe there is a big body-mind connection, I think the healthier our bodies are, the healthier our minds are, the healthier our minds are, the healthier our bodies are. These things connect, just like nature versus nurture. I think it's probably good advice to eat right and exercise if you can, but
Surely
it's
it
also good
is.
advice to have deep, meaningful conversations that really connect you. And some people will find it easier to have the deep, meaningful conversations, and some people will find it easier just to go out and run up a mountain, and that achieves whatever that achieves. But you're right. In the end of the day, we it's okay to be who you are, even if you find yourself feeling like you're swimming against the tide. Maybe everything you're seeing right now is all you need to do is exercise, and nobody's talking about meaningful intellectual conversations, and you feel the odd one. It's okay. You are going to swim against the tide sometimes. Cultures change, and what we value in a culture changes. That's what made me happiest when I started traveling, is to realize that, to just know that, to see that, how different cultures simply valued things differently. And when you grow up in one culture, you think, oh my God, I don't fit in. I'm not going to make it. Just to know that other cultures and other places don't think that, that's enough. That usually lets you feel like you can breathe again, that you're not necessarily such an oddball after all.
How do you like to end this episode? Is there something special like that you like people to know?
What's coming to mind right now is that I think it's important to, if you remember one thing from this discussion we've had, is to be a little bit more comfortable about exploring your kinks. Understand there's a world out there that, will welcome you, and a world where perhaps you can find a little bit more fulfillment. Go to a munch, go to a kink party. I don't even go to things that aren't kinky anymore, because at least when you go to a kink party, you'll meet people that'll have more open conversations. So you can have conversations about things that maybe you've never really had a conversation about, or hear about things you've never. So I guess the closing thought would be just to learn about kink, and don't be afraid to go to some event or go to a munch or talk to kinky people. Have a peek behind that door. I think it's richly rewarding. And for some, and the other thing is, some people are like, oh, but I'm not ready for this wild activity. I'm not ready for this kind of thing. I always like to point out, and I think you'll find very quickly if you explore the kink world, you're safer at a kink party than you are walking into your local sports bar. Because at a kink party, although there might be crazy people dressed in all sorts of wild ways and things happening in the background that you may or may not have ever seen before, nobody's going to touch you without your consent. And if they do, there's usually people that their job to throw your ass out. If you're the most important thing that's pretty universal in kink parties is your safety and your consent. So even though it may look like the craziest thing, you're probably safer in a sports bar. Nobody's going to slap your ass at a sports bar, or nobody's going to slap your ass at a kink party where they might at a sports bar without your consent. So it's a world worth exploring. It's a safer world than you would possibly imagine, and in a very fulfilling world. So I just encourage people to learn about kink more, and to go to a party, go to a munch, and just start talking to kinky people.
Like many of my episodes, if not all of them, it's about communication. It's about getting out of the way of ourselves to communicate better, to say what we need, know what we want, respect others, have fruitful conversations. And this episode about kink is nothing different, because once we know what we want and we share it with our partner, our fulfilled life will be elevated. If you like to go to kink party and you're into BDSM, that's wonderful. The best message here is not that you should go and do these things. The message here is that you, in your life today, with your partners, with your partner or your partners, that's also nice, be yourself. Learn how to communicate your desires so that you can feel safe and happy and build this kind of trust. Max has a wonderful documentary, really touching, emotional, true and authentic. It's called Touch Kink. I will leave the link to his website and to his documentary in the show notes. Again, live the life you like to live, not the life everyone else is expecting you to live. I'm learning this. I'm on a journey for this. I'm not there yet, but every episode, every guest is getting me closer in my practice. And I hope you feel the same way too. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it with your friends and family and ask them to subscribe. Leaving a rating and review on platforms like Apple Podcast can also help boost the podcast's ranking. Your support through word of mouth is greatly appreciated. If you feel I'm encouraging you to tell your story, contact me on Roula at thelifeaffairspodcast.com. You will see my email in the show notes. I'll see you next time.